New Orleans, Louisiana, in the Caesars Superdome, in the All-State Sugar Bowl. It all comes down to this New Year's Day night, really, 8:45 p.m. kickoff on ESPN. The number 7 Notre Dame Fighting Irish take on the number 2 Georgia Bulldogs. As you can probably tell by now, Brad, Rooster, and I, big UGA fans. But for this game, we're leaving that out. This is a non-biased game. We've got the helmets behind us. We're here to call the game with journalistic standards. Excellent preview and prediction coming your way. So let's talk about this matchup. Highly anticipated matchup. These two teams have met in this game before as well. Historical context for you. Georgia holds a 3-0 all-time record against Notre Dame, with each game decided by 7 points or less. So I think you can expect the same for this one. Georgia's most notable win against Notre Dame, if you recall, or if you're old enough, was in the 1981 Sugar Bowl, this exact stadium and game, where the Georgia Bulldogs secured its first national championship with a 17-10 victory. That's incredible, guys. You got to love the history behind these two programs. Yes, they're not in the same conference. Yes, they don't play each other that often. But when they do, boy, does it remind you of the rich history behind these two college football programs. And we've got another great one, New Year's night. So let's jump right into it. Let's give you some key players heading into this game. A newcomer, redshirt freshman, Gunner Stockton, quarterback of the Georgia Bulldogs. Carson Beck goes down in the first half, ending play in the SEC championship game. He's no longer playing. He's out the year. Gunner Stockton's the new guy. Best of luck to Carson Beck in the NFL. But Gunner, it's your time. And you've got a tough task ahead of you. In his game against the Texas Longhorns in the SEC championship, he completed 12 of 16 passes, 71 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 INT. Didn't like what he did with that mistake. Threw it across the field into double coverage. Should have been a pick six to win the game. And I almost said a cuss word there. The idiot for Texas decides to celebrate and wave his teammate on instead of making the block on the Georgia Bulldog who ends up making the play. I believe it was Oscar Delp. Shout out Oscar Delp for making that play because it ends up winning Georgia that game in the long run. Saves a pick six. But Gunner brings a different aspect to this game than what Carson Beck would have. Carson Beck, obviously a pro-style quarterback, likes to stay in the pocket, doesn't like to get out and move. He can, but that's not his instinct. He's not a dual-threat guy. And I would be ventured to say that Gunner Stockton is a dual-threat guy, regardless of what you want to say about him. Stepping into the starting role, his performance is going to be crucial for the Georgia's offensive success. These guys have rallied around him. They believe in him. They really do believe in him. Question is, can he execute? He treats this game like a pro. We talked about Jeremiyah Smith treating this game like a pro. Gunner Stockton is the same type of mentality. Acts like he's been there before. He doesn't act like Stetson did. You know, he plays with an edge like Stetson did. But Stetson was a little bit more cocky, I would say. Gunner, he just loves the game of football, and that's what he loves to do. He's going to play a tremendous role in this game. Two other guys that are going to play a tremendous role in this game are the running backs for Georgia. Nate Frazier, true freshman, wasn't expected to get any playing time this year. Then all those guys go down to injury. Roderick Robinson, Trevor Etienne, which we'll talk about in a second, Branson Robinson. You know, those guys were expected to step up. They didn't. So in steps true freshman Nate Frazier. What does he do? He picks up right where those guys left off. 129 carries on the season, 634 yards, 8 touchdowns, averaging 4.9 yards a carry. That's incredible for a true freshman running back, something that Georgia has desperately needed over the past few years. I think ever since the liking of DeAndre Swift left the state of Georgia, the Georgia Bulldogs have been lacking that explosive run game. And I think Nate Frazier brings that back to the Georgia Bulldogs. Then you look at a guy like Trevor Etienne, struggled throughout the year with injury on and off the field, had an injury heading into the fall with the wrist. Then he has a rib injury that knocks him out for several games. And the thing about rib injuries is, and Trevor said this in an interview a couple days ago that I saw, there are no remedies. There's no surgery that you can do. There's no therapy that you can do, although I'm sure there is a few practices to help it feel better. But in terms of healing, there's nothing you can do except for be patient. It's an injury that comes with time, that heals with time. Now he's 100%. So he comes into this game with 111 carries, 571 yards, and 9 touchdowns, averaging 5.1 yards per carry. I think he's going to play a tremendous role in this game. This is a guy, both him and Nate Frazier, not only can they run the rock, they can catch the ball too. These are guys that are going to set up a tremendous amount of play action, screen game. Maybe you run them out on a wheel route. Maybe you run them out to, pull that linebacker outside. It creates leverage on the inside for your guys to hit those inside mesh, slant, and over routes. I think this is going to be a tremendous factor in this game. That Georgia run game has got to step up against this Notre Dame front, who has done a tremendous job stopping the run this year. Then we're going to jump over to the Notre Dame side of the ball. None other than Jeremiyah Love of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. If you watch college football, you know this guy's name. Probably could have been a Heisman Trophy candidate if it wasn't for some of the other guys in front of him. 142 carries, over 1,000 yards rushing, 16 touchdowns. This guy's averaging 7.4 yards per carry. And they put up a clinic, an absolute clinic against the Indiana Hoosiers last week. Now, here's something I want to say. Everyone wants to talk about that 98-yard rushing touchdown by Jeremiah Love. But here's the thing. I watched the film on that game. I wasn't really impressed with Indiana's defense. I don't think it's anywhere near what Georgia's defense is capable of doing. When you look at that specific play, they bring the left safety on a blitz. The right safety can't pick it up. It has a terrible, terrible angle on the tackle. And next thing you know, Jeremiah Love's off to the races, and you're not going to catch him. So how will Georgia defend it? Not only do they have to defend Jeremiah Love, they got to defend another running back in Jadarian Price, who's put up 100 carries for 683 yards, 7 touchdowns, and he's averaging 6.8 yards per carry. I think it's pretty obvious that Notre Dame's going to try to run the ball and run the ball early. They're going to be physical at the point of attack. They're going to see what Georgia's defensive line and linebackers are made of, and that's going to set up the play action pass for a guy like Riley Leonard, who we'll talk about in a minute. Now, here's the thing about Riley Leonard. I watched several game tapes on him. Very efficient, down the field, takes what the defense gives you kind of quarterback. I don't think Notre Dame has that outside guy who can take the edge off the top, right? I don't think they have a guy like an Arian Smith, like an Anthony Evans for Georgia that just has that 10-1 speed down the field. But what he can do is pick you apart, and Georgia's got to be careful of that. Here's the thing for Georgia's defense, and we'll talk about that in the key matchups here in a minute. Georgia's defense has got to decide, are we going to play zone or are we going to play man? Georgia's struggled in man. They've had some good games with man. I don't know what they're going to do this time. I don't know if they're going to run cover 3, if they're going to run cover 6, if they're going to run man, maybe a little bit of both. They're going to have to apply some pressure, whether that's to stop the run or to stop Riley Leonard from throwing the ball. How is Georgia's secondary going to match up in this game? We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I think it's very evident both teams are going to try to run the ball early. And they're going to try to set the tone for this game. They're going to pop you in the mouth up front, and it's going to come down to whose offense and whose defensive line wants it more. Who's more aggressive? Who can take the bigger punch and get back up? All right, let's talk about Riley Leonard. 217 of 325 on the year, 2,200 yards plus passing, 17 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions. Not bad. Not bad. He's played great. He's a great leader, dual threat kind of guy. The Georgia Bulldogs are going to have to put a spy on him. I have no doubt. You're going to have to get a Smile Munden. You're going to have to get a guy like C.J. Allen, you know, and that could open up the middle for Riley Leonard. These guys are not speedsters. They're not going to hit you with go routes and post routes necessarily, especially with Malachi Starks, KJ Bolden in the secondary. It's going to be real tough sledding for this Notre Dame offense if Georgia plays disciplined. But let's say they have to take C.J. Allen out of the equation, right? And they're putting him in a spot in the middle to spy on Riley Leonard if it gets to that point in the game. That's going to open up some slant routes. That's going to open up some mesh combos, maybe a mesh over-route combo that I talked about in the last game. So how's Georgia's defense going to fare against that? That's going to be the biggest question mark to me. Now, let's talk about these key matchups. Let's look at Georgia's defense versus Notre Dame's rushing attack. Again, Notre Dame wants to run the ball. That's their MO. That is their key to victory. If they can get out ahead early and run the ball and manage the clock the way they want to, Georgia's going to be behind in the sticks, and they're going to have to rely on Gunner to make some key plays throwing the ball. So let's take a look. Let's look at Georgia's defense. How do they stack up against Notre Dame's rushing attack? Well, I'll tell you what. It's a pretty good matchup for them. For their rushing defense, they rank 32nd in yards per game, only giving up 129 rushing yards per game. They rank 29th in rushing yards per attempt. They're only giving up about 3.8 yards per attempt. We talked about the dynamic duo between Jeremiyah Love and Jadarian Price. These guys are going to run the rock. We know what we're getting up front. All right? With Notre Dame's rushing attack, they rank 10th in rushing yards per game, over 222 yards per game rushing. They rank second. This is the big stat that blew me away. When I was doing my research, this is what blew me away. They rank second in rushing yards per attempt, 6.2 rushing yards per attempt. 6.2. That's insane. That's almost a first down every single play. And if Notre Dame can do that, they're going to win this game. Now, let's look at our second key matchup of the game, shall we? We shall. Got the paper popping there on the table for this one. Notre Dame's passing defense versus Gunner Stockton. That's going to be a big matchup. Now, with Gunner Stockton, we don't have a lot of game film on him. We just don't. We don't know what he's going to be capable. We know what he's capable of doing. We know he's a tough runner. He's not afraid to take a hit. We know that. Can he play smart while also playing physical? Can he play confident while also playing focused? Let's look at Notre Dame's defense. Ranked third in opponent passing yards per game. They hold opponents to 162 yards per game. That's going to be a big, big question mark for Georgia. Because I think Georgia's defense is going to show up. I think we can look at the numbers. We can look at the game tape. Georgia's defense shows up when it matters most. The question is, how is their offense going to look? Because as far as I'm concerned, they haven't been able to run at the ball they want to. And now they've got a brand new freshman quarterback leading this team. Are they going to return more to, Lawson Lucky and Oscar Delp? Are they going to depend more on Arian Smith and Landon Humphrey? There's no telling what this Georgia offense is going to do. We know they have the capability of it, but I've seen this Notre Dame's capabilities at full strength. Brad and Rooster both taking Georgia in this one. This is a tough one for me. I'm a Georgia grad, but I'm also a college football analyst. To me, in this game, Notre Dame matches up very, very well. And then you got to look at the two outliers, which is Marcus Freeman, head coach of Notre Dame, and Kirby Smart of the Georgia Bulldogs. Kirby Smart has been in this position a long time. year in and year out, Georgia is always going to have an opportunity to play in these games and win these games. Last year, obviously, didn't make the playoff, barely snubbed by one game against Bama in the SEC championship game. They're a win away from being in the college football playoff last year. And honestly, probably would have won it. They probably would have won it. Now, that's neither here nor there. This is about Wednesday's matchup. New Year's Day, new year, new team. Who's going to come out on top? Who wants it more? Well, I'm taking the Georgia Bulldogs. And this isn't me being biased. This is me showing up, looking at the stats, looking at the game tape. Turn on the tape. This Georgia defense is electric. They're explosive. They run to the football. Now, they haven't tackled in a real game in a few weeks. Is that going to play a role? I don't know. But I expect Kirby Smart to have his team ready, locked in, and ready to roll. Trevor Etienne, first game back, full strength, New Year's Day in his home state. He's got an edge. He's playing with an edge, and he's playing for that win. He came to Georgia for these moments. He said in an interview, I came to Georgia for these games. He's going to show up. You can best believe you're going to get his best effort. So give me the Dogs in a close one. I think the Dogs win by 4. I think they win by 4 points. I think they edge out at the end in the fourth quarter. I think it's a close game, all game. You know, it's like a game of chess. They're going to put their best players out there, and they're going to see who makes a move first. In the end, I think the Georgia Bulldogs edge out on top. Let us know down in the comments who you think is going to come out in this year's 2025 Sugar Bowl in Caesars Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana, between the number 7 Notre Dame Fighting Irish and the number 2 Georgia Bulldogs. Be sure to subscribe, like this video, and share it with your friends. Until next week, it's time to break the huddle.